Take a breath, put the heavy bags down.
So, um, imagine if you won the lottery today. Like you get a massive promotion at work and you finally buy that absolute dream house you've been eyeing on Zillow for, I don't know, like 3 years.
Oh yeah, the ultimate fantasy, right?
Exactly. But neuroscientists actually know exactly how long it would take for you to feel completely, utterly empty again after getting all of that.
Which is pretty terrifying when you think about it.
It is. It's this strange, uniquely modern paradox we live in. You know, you sit down on the couch at the end of a long day and your living space is just full of stuff.
Right, and your phone is probably buzzing with a dozen notifications.
Yeah, exactly. Your calendar for the month is packed to the absolute brim, and yet there's this lingering sense of just, well, depletion.
Like you're running on empty, even though you have everything.
Right. We've surrounded ourselves with more conveniences, more choices, and more material wealth than any humans in the history of the planet.
Yeah, by a long shot.
But instead of feeling like we've crossed the finish line into some kind of blissed out utopia, we just feel chronically, exhaustingly overwhelmed.
Which is exactly what we're going to unpack today.
Yes, welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to decode exactly why modern life feels so unbelievably heavy for you, the listener.
And more importantly, how to systematically fix it using rigorous science.
Right, because we're pulling a roadmap extracted from the research in Strategies for a Simpler Life. It combines behavioral economics, neurobiology, and the longest-running study on human happiness ever conducted.
It's an incredible set of sources. But to understand why we feel this way, you really have to look backward before you look forward.
What do you mean by backward? Like evolutionary history?
Yeah, exactly. The fundamental biological reality of the human brain, I mean your brain, my brain, is that it evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in environments defined by one unyielding rule.
Which is scarcity.
Right. Scarcity. If our ancestors found high-calorie food, they consumed it immediately. If they found a useful tool or like a piece of shelter, they kept it.
Because you never knew when you'd find it again.
Exactly. Our neurological wiring is totally optimized to acquire and hoard resources because for most of human history, that is literally what kept you alive.
So the problem is you're taking that ancient scarcity-driven brain and dropping it right into the 21st century.
Yeah, an environment of hyper availability and just absolute overabundance.
It's like we're walking around with hardware designed for the Stone Age,
Yeah,
but we're trying to run software built for the Amazon Prime era.
that is a great way to put it. We finally got everything we ever wanted, and our brains are just short-circuiting.
So how does that short circuit actually play out in our daily lives?
Well, behavioral economists have a term for this documented phenomenon. They call it the hedonic treadmill.
The hedonic treadmill, like you're running but going nowhere.
Exactly. It operates as a systemic biological feedback loop. So you acquire something new. Maybe it's a faster phone, a new car, or that promotion you mentioned earlier.
And you feel great, right? Like a rush.
Yeah, when that happens, your brain gives you a massive spike of dopamine. You feel a surge of joy. But the thing is, your brain is also highly adaptive.
Oh, so it gets used to it.
Right. It rapidly adjusts to that new baseline. The thrill fades, the emotional resonance flatlines, and you are just left with this relentless, unfulfilling drive to acquire the next thing.
Just to feel that dopamine spike again.
Exactly. You are running on a treadmill, burning massive amounts of metabolic and psychological energy, but emotionally, you aren't moving an inch.
Wow. And there is a foundational model here from Dr. Sonja Lyubomirsky that completely contextualizes this treadmill. It really blew my mind when we were going through the source material.
Yeah, her research on happiness variance is totally groundbreaking.
Right. She basically looked at the actual variance in human happiness. Essentially, like, what statistically makes one person happier than another. And she broke it down into percentages.
Which is where the 50-10-40 rule comes in.
Yes.
Yeah.
The 50-10-40 rule. So 50% of our baseline happiness is just a genetic set point.
It's like an internal emotional thermostat.
Yeah, exactly. Some people are just naturally wired to be a little more buoyant, and some are wired to be a little more melancholic.
And you really can't change that half. It's basically the biological lottery.
Right. And that genetic baseline provides a tremendous amount of resilience, but it also means we have a ceiling and a floor that we naturally gravitate toward.
But then, and this is the part that is so hard for people to wrap their heads around, only 10% of our happiness variance is based on our life circumstances.
Wait, really? Only 10%.
Just 10%. That bucket includes your income level, your marital status, your baseline health, and even your geographic location.
That is absolutely wild. So that 10% is essentially the fuel for the hedonic treadmill.
Exactly. That is the new house in the better neighborhood, the geographic relocation to a sunnier state, the higher salary.
But because of hedonic adaptation, you adjust to those external changes so efficiently that their long-term impact on your statistical well-being is, well, incredibly minimal.
Yeah, it almost disappears over time.
Which is crazy when you look at how we structure our society. I mean,
Yeah.
we spend 99% of our energy, our stress, our literal waking hours chasing that 10%.
Oh, absolutely. We are sacrificing our sleep and our sanity to get the bigger house, fighting tooth and nail over a slice of the pie that barely moves the needle on our actual joy.
We're agonizing over circumstances that statistically just do not matter nearly as much as we think they do.
And it represents a massive misallocation of human energy, which really brings us to the crux of our entire deep dive today, the remaining 40%.
Right, the missing 40%.
So if 50% is your genetic thermostat and 10% is circumstantial, you are left with a 40% variance in your subjective well-being.
And what makes up that 40%?
That chunk is entirely controlled by what Dr. Lyubomirsky terms intentional activities.
You mean the conscious structural choices we make every single day?
Exactly. This 40% is where human agency actually lives. This is where you actually have control over your mental health and your daily experience.
So simplifying your life isn't just about giving up your ambitions or like living in a totally empty room.
No, not at all. It is about a deliberate, structurally sound optimization of this 40%. It's about stripping away the non-essential psychological and physical burdens.
So you can reallocate your finite cognitive resources toward practices that actually foster genuine, lasting well-being.
Right. So to fix the 40%, we first have to figure out what is currently draining our cognitive resources dry. We have to find the invisible leaks in the system.
And I guess the most tangible place to start is the physical space right in front of you.
Definitely. Your physical environment exerts a continuous and almost entirely unconscious influence on your cognitive function.
And your neuroendocrine regulation. Right.
Yes, exactly. We usually frame physical clutter as just a cosmetic issue. You know, a messy desk, a disorganized kitchen, clothes piled on a chair.
Yeah, we just think, oh, I should clean that up when I have time.
Right, but neurobiologically, physical clutter acts as a persistent, aggressive source of competing visual stimuli.
And there are neurological studies from Princeton University that tracked exactly how the brain handles this visual processing.
And the timeline they found is just staggering.
Yeah. They found that within the very first 200 milliseconds of visual processing, which is literally a fraction of a second, a cluttered environment forces your brain to work overtime.
Because the human visual cortex was simply not designed to process dozens of unrelated, disparate objects simultaneously.
So to allow you to focus on the one thing you actually want to do, say reading an email on your laptop, your brain's executive function has to continuously actively filter everything else out.
Right, it's filtering out the coffee mug, the stack of mail, the random charging cable, the pen.
It requires an active suppression of data.
Exactly. The brain is constantly evaluating the environment for relevance. Like it's asking,
Yeah.
Is this important? No. Is this a threat? No.
And it is doing this thousands of times a minute.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It makes me think about a computer when you have way too many background applications running.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You know, when your laptop is running hot, the fan is screaming and the battery is just draining and you can't figure out why because you're only looking at one simple web page.
Yeah, but you have 50 other tabs open.
Exactly. 50 tabs and apps open in the background, continuously refreshing and pulling data. Even if you aren't actively looking at that clutter on your desk, it is eating up your mental RAM.
It's draining your battery, leaving you completely exhausted for the actual meaningful tasks you need to perform.
And that ambient drain triggers a profound physiological consequence, doesn't it?
It really does. When your brain is constantly fighting to filter the environment, it senses that the environment is chaotic.
And chaos implies unpredictability.
Right. And unpredictability activates the body's ancient alarm systems. This dynamic was actually captured perfectly in a landmark longitudinal study conducted by the UCLA Center on Everyday Lives of Families.
Often referred to as the CLF study, right?
Yes, the CLF study. They took 32 middle-class, dual-income families, and instead of just issuing surveys to ask how they felt about their homes, they tracked their actual biological stress levels.
Wow, how did they do that?
They were taking saliva samples at regular intervals throughout the day to measure cortisol levels. They were looking for the chemical footprint of stress.
Cortisol being the primary stress hormone.
Exactly. And what they uncovered was a striking correlation between the sheer density of household objects, literally counting the number of things pinned to the refrigerator or stacked in the living room, and biological stress.
But the critical finding here was highly specific to women, right?
Yes, women who perceived their homes as highly cluttered exhibited what endocrinologists call flattened diurnal cortisol slopes.
Flattened diurnal cortisol slopes. Let's unpack the mechanism of that slope. What is cortisol actually supposed to do over the course of a 24-hour period?
Well, in a healthy endocrine system, your cortisol should peak in the early morning. It is the chemical surge that wakes you up, gets you out of bed, and basically prepares you to face the day's challenges.
Okay, so it starts high.
Right. Then it should gradually taper off as the day progresses, reaching its lowest point in the evening so your nervous system can downregulate and you can sleep.
So it's a steep, healthy slope downward.
Exactly. But a flattened slope means that natural rhythm is broken. The hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis, which is the command center that regulates your body's stress response, it just gets locked.
Locked in a perpetual low-grade fight-or-flight state.
Yes, the cortisol doesn't peak and drop, it just stays elevated all day.
Oh man, it's like a fire alarm that gets stuck on a low hum instead of ringing loud and then turning off.
That's exactly how it feels biologically.
These women were physically existing in a state of chronic, low-level emergency just because of the density of objects in their living space.
And there is a vital sociological nuance the researchers documented here, too.
What was that?
The men living in those exact same cluttered households frequently did not exhibit the same cortisol disruptions.
Really? That is so interesting, and it speaks volumes about our cultural programming and domestic expectations.
Oh, absolutely.
The women in the study were internalizing the state of the home as a reflection of their personal responsibility, or maybe even a personal failure, which triggered the physiological stress response.
Right. The men, by contrast, simply did not process the visual clutter with the same psychological weight.
They just saw a pile of laundry as a pile of laundry, not an indictment of their management skills.
Exactly. But regardless of the sociological trigger, for anyone experiencing that flattened cortisol slope, the physiological cascade over time is devastating.
Because your body isn't meant to run on stress hormones all day.
No, it's not. When your HPA axis is perpetually activated, that chronic low-grade cortisol elevation begins to actively impact the hippocampus.
Which is the brain region responsible for memory consolidation and learning, right?
Yes. High cortisol literally inhibits the brain's ability to lay down new memories. It increases blood pressure, it diverts blood flow away from essential organs.
And crucially, it destroys your sleep architecture.
It absolutely wrecks it.
The American Academy of Sleep Medicine actually corroborated this.
Yeah.
They showed that individuals who sleep in cluttered environments are significantly more likely to develop sleeping disorders.
Yeah, they spend much less time in restorative REM sleep.
And then, in a cruel twist of biological irony, that sleep deprivation impairs executive function the next day, which just increases the risk of hoarding behaviors, creating this vicious, self-sustaining loop.
Because if you are sleep deprived, you just don't have the cognitive energy to make the decision to throw something away.
So the clutter grows, the cortisol stays flat, and the sleep gets worse.
It's a brutal cycle.
So if physical clutter is eating up our visual cortex, draining our mental RAM, and locking our endocrine system into fight or flight, what happens when we take that exact same principle of overabundance and apply it to the internal cognitive environment?
You mean our choices?
Yeah. We are surrounded by too much physical stuff, but we are also drowning in choices.
Right. Just as physical clutter overwhelms the visual cortex, an overabundance of options overwhelms the prefrontal cortex.
And that's the brain region located right behind your forehead, responsible for complex decision-making, working memory, projecting into the future, and executive control.
Exactly. And the psychologist Barry Schwartz famously termed the fallout from this the paradox of choice.
The paradox of choice. I love this concept.
It's brilliant. The theory posits that while a baseline of choice is essential for human autonomy, because we need to feel some sense of control over our own lives to be mentally healthy, an infinite excess of options actually paralyzes the prefrontal cortex.
It breeds post-choice regret and actively diminishes our overall life satisfaction.
We see this everywhere today. You go to a restaurant with a 10-page menu, and instead of feeling excited by the variety, you just feel anxious about making the wrong choice.
Right. But logically, I know a lot of people struggle with this concept because mathematically, shouldn't more choices guarantee a better outcome?
You would certainly think so.
Like, think about booking a flight. If I log on and I have 10,000 possible combinations of seats, luggage options, layovers, departure times, and airlines, probability dictates that I am much more likely to find the absolute perfect, optimal flight than if I only had 3 choices.
Mathematically, yes.
So why does the actual experience of making that booking feel uniquely awful?
Because that mathematical advantage completely ignores the hidden neurobiological cost of the calculation itself.
The cost to the brain.
Right. Your prefrontal cortex doesn't get to just magically snap its fingers and arrive at the optimal choice. It has to actively weigh every single variable against every other variable.
And the modern world demands a relentless stream of these micro decisions.
The flight booking, scrolling through endless tiles on streaming services trying to find the perfect movie.
Oh man, the streaming scroll is the worst.
Yeah.
Or trying to pick a toothpaste at a mega store where there are 80 different varieties.
Yes. All of this leads to a state of profound decision fatigue.
And what is physically happening in the brain when we hit that fatigue?
Okay, so the rapid, sustained firing of neurons in your prefrontal cortex as you weigh all these variables leads to an excessive release of a neurotransmitter called glutamate into the synaptic cleft.
Which is the space between your neurons.
Exactly. Now, glutamate is excitatory, it makes neurons fire, but too much of it is toxic.
Like flooding a car engine with too much fuel.
That's a perfect comparison. The engine stalls. Simultaneously, this intense processing rapidly burns through the brain's finite glucose reserves.
So you're draining the actual physical metabolic fuel of your brain.
Yes. So when you hit a wall at 4:00 p.m. and you feel like you literally cannot decide what to have for dinner, it's not a moral failing.
Right. It's not laziness. You are metabolically depleted. Your prefrontal cortex is literally out of gas.
Exactly. As your metabolic resources plummet, your neural efficiency drops. And something even more insidious happens to protect the brain from further energy loss.
What's that?
The dopamine receptors in the nucleus accumbens, which is a key structure in the reward center of your brain, begin to downregulate and desensitize.
Wow, really?
Yeah, your brain essentially runs a subconscious cost-benefit analysis and decides that the energetic cost of calculating the absolute optimal decision is no longer worth the potential dopamine reward.
The brain just throws its hands up and says, the squeeze is no longer worth the juice. I'm done.
Exactly.
So what happens to our behavior when those dopamine receptors desensitize?
Well, the brain defaults to extreme energy-saving shortcuts. It bypasses the prefrontal cortex entirely.
Oh, this is when individuals become highly susceptible to impulse purchases, right?
Yeah.
Yes. You buy the candy at the checkout counter, or you click buy now on an ad you see on social media, because resisting the impulse requires prefrontal energy you no longer have.
That makes total sense.
Yeah,
And it also leads to passive avoidance, doesn't it?
definitely. We delay critical medical checkups, or we put off rebalancing our retirement portfolios simply because the complexity of the choice is too neurologically expensive to process.
And emotionally, it drastically spikes irritability in our interpersonal relationships.
Right, because regulating your temper also requires prefrontal glucose. It fundamentally shifts how you operate in the world.
You know, psychologists differentiate between 2 types of decision makers in this context, maximizers and satisficers.
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction here.
Maximizers are people who naturally seek the absolute optimal outcome in any given situation. They have to research every option.
They want the absolute best.
Right. Satisficers, on the other hand, are people who have a baseline criteria and they just settle for the first option that meets that criteria, even if a better one might exist.
They say good enough is good enough.
Exactly. And chronic decision fatigue is so burdensome that it forces natural maximizers to become satisficers just to survive the cognitive load.
They just start picking whatever is right in front of them to escape the pain of choosing.
So stripping away this excess, both the physical clutter and the cognitive overload, really requires intentional structural defenses.
You cannot rely on willpower because, as we just discussed, willpower is inextricably tied to glucose. It is a finite biological resource.
You can't just promise yourself you'll try harder to be organized.
Yeah.
You need objective rules that bypass the prefrontal cortex entirely.
And the source material offers some incredibly practical heuristics to defeat decision fatigue when it comes to material clutter.
2 frameworks that stand out are the 90-90 rule and the 20-20 rule.
Oh, I love these.
The 90-90 rule is beautifully ruthless. You look at an object and ask, have I used this in the past 90 days? And do I realistically, objectively anticipate using it in the next 90 days.
And if the answer to both is no, it leaves the house.
Yep. It is a brilliant psychological mechanism because it forces the brain out of aspirational thinking.
We keep so many things for the fantasy version of ourselves, don't we?
Totally. The version that suddenly takes up kayaking or learns to speak French or finally wears those really uncomfortable shoes.
The 90-90 rule anchors your decisions in objective temporal reality. Furthermore, it overcomes two massive cognitive biases.
Right, the first being the sunk cost fallacy.
Yes, which is the irrational urge to keep something just because you spent money on it in the past.
And the second is the endowment effect, where human beings assign a higher value to an object simply because they own it.
Exactly. It breaks both of those biases.
And then there's the 20-20 rule, which feels specifically designed to target that one drawer in the kitchen or that box in the garage full of random cables, spare buttons, and weird tools you're terrified to throw away.
The junk drawer rule.
Yes.
Yeah.
The rule states, if it is a just-in-case item and you can replace it for under $20 in under 20 minutes from your physical location, you give yourself permission to discard it.
It completely defeats that scarcity anxiety.
It quantifies exactly how negligible the risk of removing that safety net actually is. You realize, okay, if I ever actually need a USB-A to Mini-B cable, which I haven't needed since 2012, I can drive to the pharmacy and buy one for $6.
It's so liberating. Those material heuristics are vital. But simplifying your physical possessions will only get you so far if you don't simultaneously simplify your commitments.
And this is where Greg McKeown's framework of essentialism becomes critical to our 40% optimization.
Essentialism is defined as the disciplined, continuous pursuit of less, but better.
It requires a massive philosophical shift, though. Our societal default, driven by the fear of missing out, is to say yes to everything.
Right, but essentialism demands a highly selective protocol of saying no.
McKeown points out a very uncomfortable truth. Humans are infinitely capable, but we are finitely resourced.
We only have so much energy.
Exactly. If you try to do everything, like if you say yes to every committee, every social obligation, every side project, you end up making a millimeter of progress in a million different directions.
You are exhausted, but you haven't actually moved the needle on anything that matters.
He uses a very powerful analogy in his work. He likens the essentialist mindset to cleaning out a closet.
Oh, this is a great comparison.
If you look at a shirt and ask yourself, is there a chance I will wear this someday? The answer is almost always yes. There's always a non-zero chance.
And because the answer is yes, you end up hoarding.
Right. But if you change the criteria and ask, do I absolutely love this shirt and do I wear it often? The closet clears out very quickly.
Essentialism applies that exact same ruthless filter to your life and career commitments.
It's the 90% rule. When you are evaluating an opportunity, a new project at work, an invitation to a weekend event, you grade it on a scale of 1 to 100 based on its actual value and alignment with your core goals.
And if it scores anything less than a 90 out of 100, you treat it as a definitive 0. You reject it.
It completely eliminates the agonizing middle ground of the maybe. It mirrors the philosophy of entrepreneur Derek Sivers, who operates on the rule that if a commitment does not elicit an immediate, visceral, hell yeah response, it should be a categorical no.
But saying no is incredibly difficult for people because it triggers social anxiety.
Because we are a social species and we fear disappointing the tribe.
Exactly. We also have the status quo bias working against us, making us keep doing things simply because they are our current default.
So how do essentialists combat this?
They use a structural technique called reverse piloting.
Like testing a theory by taking something away instead of adding it.
Yes. You temporarily drop a recurring commitment. Maybe you stop attending a certain weekly status meeting, or you step down from organizing a neighborhood event for 1 month just to test the actual real-world impact of your absence.
And what usually happens?
Most of the time, you realize the obligation was truly non-essential. The world didn't end because you weren't at the meeting.
Saying no gracefully really has to be reframed in the brain then. It is not an act of rejection. It is an act of vital protection for your finite physical and mental assets.
And arguably, one of the most vital assets we have is time. We talk constantly about material wealth, tracking our bank accounts and our net worth.
But the research of Dr. Ashley Willens pushes us to focus on a different metric, time affluence.
Right. And Dr. Willen's research reveals a startling statistic about the modern condition. 80% of employed adults worldwide report suffering from time poverty.
Time poverty. So the chronic psychological experience of having too many tasks and insufficient time to complete them.
Exactly. And the empirical data she gathered shows that time poverty produces a stronger negative effect on your daily subjective happiness than actually being unemployed.
Wait, that is a staggering data point. The stress of having too much to do while employed is mathematically worse for your daily joy than having no job at all.
Yes, because chronic time poverty leads to a massive reduction in daily laughter, lower work productivity, declining physical health, and significantly higher divorce rates.
Wow.
But cultivating time affluence, the feeling of having breathing room in your schedule, is a proven structural key to simplifying life.
And her research across diverse global populations shows that individuals who consistently prioritize time over money report greater subjective well-being.
And the beauty of this is that you don't have to quit your job or become a monk to get it.
Right. The data shows that spending as little as $40 to outsource a dreaded, time-consuming chore, like having someone mow your lawn or paying for grocery delivery so you don't spend 2 hours at the store on a Sunday, yields a significantly higher happiness dividend than spending that same $40 on a material item.
You are literally buying your life back.
But here's the catch, and this is where her concept of time confetti comes into play. Even when we do manage to buy our time back or we finally secure a free weekend, our modern environment works against us.
Oh, the digital interruptions.
Exactly. Our digital notifications shred our free time into useless, stressful little fragments. It's time confetti.
That's such a visceral image.
Think about sitting at a park on a Saturday afternoon, pushing your kid on the swings. By all definitions, you are technically at leisure. You are experiencing time affluence.
Right.
But then your smartwatch vibrates or your phone pings with a work email. You don't even have to open it or answer it. Just the ping itself, the sudden reminder of the professional obligation, triggers a microdose of cortisol.
It makes you feel guilty for being at the park.
It entirely defeats the purpose of the leisure.
Psychologists refer to this as the mere urgency effect. It is the psychological pull to address objectively unimportant tasks simply because they present themselves immediately right in front of your face.
And the main culprit driving this mere urgency effect is the modern attention economy.
Right. These digital platforms aren't accidental distractions. They're explicitly engineered by incredibly smart attention engineers utilizing behavioral psychology to cultivate compulsive use and maximize your screen time.
Your attention is the product they are selling.
Which is why Cal Newport's approach to digital minimalism is not just a nice idea, it is a necessary structural defense mechanism.
He advocates for a rigorous 30-day digital declutter.
Right. Yes, the protocol is strict. You strip away all non-essential, optional technologies from your devices for a full month. No social media, no news alerts, no infinite scrolling apps.
For most people listening, the idea of turning off all those inputs for 30 days sounds absolutely terrifying.
It does induce panic initially, and that panic is purely biological. The brain actually has to undergo a dopamine reset.
Oh, like a withdrawal.
Yes, there is frequently a documented initial phase of anxiety, boredom, and withdrawal during the first week. Your brain is craving the cheap, easy dopamine it's used to getting from a notification.
But once the dopamine receptors begin to upregulate and heal, that withdrawal gives way to profound cognitive clarity.
The empirical data on digital minimalism is incredible. Studies observing students who underwent this declutter and intentionally replaced screen time with high-quality analog leisure, like activities requiring physical engagement, deep reading, or in-person interaction, showed vastly improved concentration.
And didn't it also reduce depressive symptoms?
Yes, significantly reduced depressive symptoms and a measurable 12% increase in academic performance.
A 12% bump in academic performance just from clearing the digital clutter. It shows how much potential energy we are wasting.
It really does.
So let's take stock of where we are in our roadmap. Stripping away the negative, decluttering the physical space, implementing rules to bypass decision fatigue, saying no to non-essential commitments, and surviving the attention economy by resetting our dopamine. That is the defense.
Yeah, but that is only half the battle.
Once we have cleared the space, once we have reclaimed that 40% of our intentional capacity, how do we actively use it to build joy?
Well, when you have a cleared physical and cognitive space, you use that reclaimed metabolic energy to engage in specific psychological strategies that consistently yield the highest empirical returns for human happiness.
And the data points us to two foundational practices: the clinical application of gratitude and the art of savoring.
Let's start with gratitude, because in the cultural zeitgeist, gratitude often gets a really bad rap.
It does. It feels like a fluffy self-help buzzword. Someone tells you to count your blessings when you're stressed, and it can feel, I don't know, dismissive.
But when you look at the source material and the actual clinical power behind it, it is unbelievable. The clinical application of gratitude is entirely rooted in rigorous neurobiology.
Dr. Robert Emmons is one of the world's leading researchers on this, right?
Yes, he defines gratitude not as a fleeting feeling, but as a vital two-step cognitive process.
What are the two steps?
First, you have to actively recognize a positive outcome or a state of goodness in your life. You have to locate it.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the crucial second step is acknowledging that the source of this goodness lies, at least partially, outside of yourself.
Which is why gratitude is the ultimate scientifically proven antidote to the hedonic treadmill.
Exactly. If the hedonic treadmill is an internal voice constantly saying, I need more external things to be happy, gratitude is the cognitive practice of saying, I already have external goodness sustaining me.
It fundamentally extends the utility and joy derived from your existing circumstances, breaking the cycle of constant acquisition.
And the clinical metrics from structured gratitude practices are staggering. In controlled studies, individuals who engage in structured daily gratitude practices, like keeping a detailed journal, experience an approximate 25% increase in subjective well-being.
25%. But it goes beyond mood, right?
It does. Physiologically, these individuals show a 23% reduction in cortisol compared to control groups who just journal about their daily hassles.
A 23% drop in the primary stress hormone just from deliberately framing your thoughts.
Yeah.
That is wild.
It cascades down to cellular health, too. Studies on patients suffering from heart failure who were instructed to keep gratitude journals actually showed reduced biomarkers of cellular inflammation compared to the control group.
It is a literal biological intervention.
Yeah.
But how do we actively, systematically do it? Because it's not just walking around saying thanks to the barista.
No, there are specific psychological interventions designed to maximize this effect. One of the most powerful tools in the research is called mental subtraction.
Mental subtraction. What does that involve?
This is a deeply immersive cognitive exercise where you close your eyes and vividly imagine your life without a specific, deeply valued relationship, opportunity, or possession. You mentally erase it from your timeline.
Oh, wow. So imagine you never met your spouse, or imagine you never got the job you currently have.
Exactly. This starkly counters hedonic adaptation because it forces your nervous system to feel the genuine void of its absence. When you open your eyes and realize you still have it, it renews a profound, visceral appreciation for the status quo.
It shocks the system out of taking things for granted. And Dr. Emmons notes that gratitude also serves a critical sociological function, which researchers call the find, remind, and bind function.
Humans are deeply social, so this is key. Gratitude helps you find new, high-quality relationships by making you more attuned to the thoughtfulness and pro-social behavior of others.
It reminds you of the inherent goodness in your existing relationships, preventing you from taking your partner or friends for granted.
Right, and it binds individuals together through reciprocal acts of appreciation.
Which leads perfectly into the second strategy for optimizing our 40%, the art of savoring. Dr. Fred Bryant's research on this is really fascinating.
He bases his work on Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory. To understand savoring, we have to acknowledge the brain's negativity bias.
From an evolutionary perspective, our brains are wired to notice and remember threats significantly more than joys.
Yeah, remembering where the tiger lives was much more important for survival than remembering where the pretty sunset was.
Savoring is the conscious, deliberate effort to overcome that negativity bias by mindfully engaging with and actively amplifying the emotional impact of positive events.
And Dr. Fredrickson's broaden and build theory posits that when we force our brains to experience positive emotions deeply, it literally broadens our cognitive repertoire.
It allows us to see more possibilities, and over time, it builds durable psychological resilience.
Dr. Bryant breaks savoring down into 3 distinct temporal forms, which provides a great framework.
Right. There's anticipatory savoring, which is looking forward to the future. You can extract real neurochemical joy from a vacation weeks before you even pack your bags just by vividly imagining the details of the trip.
Then there's in-the-moment savoring, which is full sensory immersion in the present.
And reminiscent savoring, which is recalling past joy to deliberately elevate a neutral or negative mood in the present.
The thread connecting all three is conscious, sustained attention.
The analogy that really crystallizes in-the-moment savoring for me involves eating a piece of high-quality chocolate.
This is a great example.
You can eat a piece of luxury chocolate by tossing it in your mouth, chewing it twice, and swallowing it while you are distracted, typing an email.
You get the calories, but almost zero psychological benefit.
Exactly. Or you can practice savoring. You place it on your tongue. You close your eyes. You deliberately block out other sensory inputs. You let it melt, noticing the exact moment the cocoa hits your palate, registering the texture and the temperature.
It is the exact same piece of chocolate, but the neurological experience is entirely different. You have extracted maximum joy from the stimulus.
And part of that process, which I find so deeply poignant, is acknowledging the price of admission.
Meaning accepting the impermanence of the positive experience.
Right. Knowing that the moment is fleeting. Accepting that the chocolate will melt and be gone, that the vacation will inevitably end, that your kids will grow up and move out of the house.
Paradoxically, acknowledging that a good time will end doesn't ruin the moment. It makes it infinitely more valuable.
It forces your wandering brain to pay attention right now, because this specific configuration of reality will never happen again.
That level of attention is incredibly powerful. But we must look at what happens when we direct that newly simplified, joyful attention outward.
Because gratitude and savoring are powerful internal practices. But the most profound structural neurobiological shifts happen when we turn our focus toward other people.
The pro-social dimension. Human neurobiology is fundamentally, inescapably wired for social connection, cooperation, and altruism. We are a tribal species.
Therefore, prosocial behavior isn't just a philosophical ideal or moral imperative. It is arguably the single most potent biological mechanism we possess for increasing personal happiness and physical health.
This mechanism is what researcher Alan Lux coined the helper's high.
The helper's high.
Yeah. When you perform an act of genuine kindness, whether it's helping a neighbor carry groceries, volunteering your time, or donating to a cause you care about, your brain's mesolimbic reward circuitry activates.
And what is fascinating is that this circuitry activates identically to how it would if you were the one receiving a stack of cash or eating a plate of high-calorie sugary food.
Altruism triggers the release of a massive neurotransmitter trifecta.
Right, it releases dopamine, which is the brain's reward and achievement chemical, making you feel motivated.
It releases serotonin, which promotes a deep sense of calm and emotional balance.
And most importantly, it releases oxytocin, famously known as the bonding hormone.
Oxytocin is incredible because it goes beyond emotion. It actively lowers your blood pressure and stimulates the production of heart-protective nitric oxide.
So altruism literally acts as an endogenous internal painkiller and an anti-inflammatory inside your cardiovascular system.
Doing good for others literally heals the physical damage of stress in your own body.
But to sustain that prosocial behavior over a lifetime without burning out, we have to look at the work of Dr. Tanya Singer and the Resource Project.
Her research draws a very stark, distinct line between empathy and compassion.
And colloquially, we use those terms interchangeably all the time. But neurobiologically, the distinction is a matter of life and death for our emotional reserves.
The distinction is critical. Empathy involves neurologically mirroring or mimicking the pain of another person.
When you see someone suffering, your brain's pain matrices light up as if you were the one experiencing the trauma.
Right. Empathy is vital for initial understanding and connection, but if you stay in that physiological state of empathy, it is neurologically painful.
It leads to rapid empathic distress, emotional burnout, and ultimately you withdraw from the person suffering just to protect your own nervous system.
You cannot carry the weight of the world's pain without breaking.
So what is compassion then?
Compassion activates an entirely different neural network. Compassion involves recognizing this suffering, feeling a deep sense of warmth toward the person, and generating a proactive motivation to help them without taking on their paralyzing pain.
And the Resource Project proved this distinction with fMRI scans, right?
It was a massive 9-month longitudinal study. They put participants through various mental training modules and continually scanned their brains.
What did they find?
When participants practice affect training, which specifically focuses on cultivating compassion and pro-social motivation rather than just empathy, the researchers observed physical structural thickening in the cortical regions of the brain.
Specifically, the frontoinsular regions and the temporal parietal juncture, or TPJ, let's translate that. Compassion literally, physically altered the structure of the brain. It built gray matter.
Yes. It demonstrates that compassion is not a fixed genetic trait you are either born with or not. It is a highly trainable skill that results in structural brain plasticity.
It is like building a muscle to carry a heavy weight without throwing out your back.
And the primary vehicle for this training in the study was loving kindness meditation, or LKM.
What did that look like in practice?
It involves sitting quietly and engaging in the mental repetition of specific well wishes directed outward, first toward yourself, then toward loved ones, and eventually extending toward acquaintances and even difficult people in your life.
The silent repetition of phrases like, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be free from suffering.
And the physiological shifts resulting from consistent LKM practice are profound. It creates what cardiologists call brain-heart coupling.
It increases respiratory sinus arrhythmia, which is a key marker of healthy vagal tone, meaning your nervous system can easily bounce back from stress.
And most remarkably, it literally slows down biological aging at the cellular level by lengthening the telomeres at the ends of your chromosomes.
Telomeres are like the little plastic tips at the ends of your shoelaces that keep them from fraying, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what they do for your DNA. Every time your cells divide, those tips get shorter, which is the biological process of aging.
So compassion practice actively preserves those plastic tips. It protects your DNA. It turns the paralyzing heavy weight of empathy into actionable, soothing compassion.
So if compassion is the highest, most optimized use of our brain's architecture, we must look at what happens when we sustain that approach over an entire lifetime.
We've cleared the physical clutter to protect our visual cortex. We've bypassed decision fatigue to protect our prefrontal cortex. We've reclaimed our time, practiced gratitude, and cultivated structural compassion.
Where does that roadmap end?
To answer that, we turn to the most extensive, comprehensive study on human happiness ever conducted in the history of science, the Harvard Study of Adult Development.
Dr. Robert Waldinger is the current director of the study.
Right. They have been tracking the exact same group of participants, starting with a cohort of Harvard undergraduates and a cohort of inner-city Boston youth for over 85 years.
They have followed these men and later their spouses and children through wars, economic crises, marriages, divorces, and career triumphs.
They have their medical records, their psychological profiles, their brain scans, their blood work.
And after 8.5 decades of the most rigorous scientific tracking imaginable, analyzing millions of data points, the definitive conclusion of the study is breathtakingly simple.
Relationships keep us happier and healthier, period.
That is the grand secret to a good life. The data is completely unequivocal on this point.
When the researchers looked back at the participants to see who aged the best, what did they find?
They found that a person's relationship satisfaction at age 50 is a vastly more accurate predictor of their physical health at age 80 than their middle-age cholesterol levels.
Let that sink in for a moment. The warmth and security of your relationships protects your physical body, your brain, and your heart better than your lipid panel.
High-quality relationships act as a biological buffer against the friction of life. They protect the brain against cognitive decline and delay physical deterioration.
When you experience a severe stressful event, like a job loss, a wealth scare, a conflict, your body floods with cortisol and adrenaline.
But interacting with a trusted confidant actively accelerates the downregulation of your nervous system. The presence of a loved one physically halts the damaging cascade of stress hormones.
And it is important to note that this applies equally to both introverts and extroverts. The protective benefit is about quality, not quantity.
You don't need a massive social circle. You just need secure attachment, the deep internalized knowledge that someone will reliably be there for you in a crisis.
And the Harvard study completely dismantled the myth of the consumption trap that we discussed at the very beginning. They corroborated the income plateau.
Right. Once your basic economic needs are met, and you have secure food, shelter, and health care, which sociological studies traditionally cite around $75,000 annually, though obviously it fluctuates with inflation.
Additional wealth does not mathematically scale with additional happiness. The billionaires in this study were not happier than the middle-class participants who had good marriages.
In fact, when researchers interviewed the participants at the very end of their lives, in their 80s and 90s, the primary, universal regret across all socioeconomic classes was overworking.
The deepest regret was spending the prime years of their lives chasing that elusive 10% of external circumstances, the promotions, the bigger houses, the prestige, instead of connecting with the people they loved.
A simple life isn't just an empty closet.
No, It isn't just a deleted app on your phone or a perfectly optimized Google Calendar or a minimalist aesthetic. Those are just the tools to stop the leaks.
A truly simple life is the systematic, fierce reallocation of your finite energy toward what actually matters.
It is clearing the chaotic noise of the modern world so you can finally hear the signal. It is taking that 40% of your life that you actually control and using it to build profound, durable connection.
To step off the treadmill and walk alongside someone else.
Dr. Waldinger, reviewing 85 years of human triumph and tragedy, noted a concept from Zen philosophy that perfectly encapsulates this entire deep dive. The concept is that undivided attention is the most basic, fundamental form of love. So think about your own schedule for the next 24 hours. Look past the physical clutter in your house, past the glowing screens in your pocket, and past the endless, exhausting micro-decisions. Where and to whom are you giving your most basic form of love?
Follow the impulse, the inner self is sending. There is no need for the pushing and pretending. It's already working. The universe says yes. Just trust it will be easy. Let it be effortless.